Sometimes we get our hopes up about games thinking we're about to get something fantastic, something new, something to compete in this ruthless gaming scene. And then sometimes we get Avowed, one of the most unbelievable disappointments of this year. It wasn't bad per se, it was just insanely mundane, basic, and lacked any sort of innovation besides having a pretty fun combat system. I think most of us built it up to have a competitor to Elder Scrolls, and that was a bit much, but one can always hope, I suppose. And that kind of launch didn't really inspire much confidence in the Outer Worlds 2. And fortunately, that opinion was dead wrong. It has been 6 years since the original Outer Worlds came out, swinging as the studio who made New Vegas, basically making us all think we are about to get a New Vegas tier game, but rather received a much different experience. Less open world, far more linear, a great amount of choices and consequences letting you play in a number of ways, yet an ending that was once again, and I cannot stress this enough, so bland, boring, and generic that I literally never wanted to beat that game again just to avoid that experience. Even though, yes, I did play through that game 4 times. It was one of those endings that just builds up to depressing nothingness. All of my choices up to that moment meant nothing, and so the outcome was always going to be the same no matter what I did. The journey, however, was the good part. All of the side quests, characters, the insane stuff you could do, weapons to collect, companions to touch, shower with care and relatability. In the end, the Outer Worlds created a world of witty, over-the-top capitalism bad, which kinda sucks in today's culture because just like ye old faithful memes, people found it incredibly humorous then, but that ship has sailed, so they needed to find a way to still use that world, but without dedicating every second to that joke. All in all, it made a fine addition to the horrendous lack of real choice and consequence-driven RPGs these days, because so many games think they're an RPG, when in reality, let's face it, they're action-adventure games. So then, we arrive at the ultimate question, is the Outer Worlds 2 worth your time? And genuinely, yes. But it will eat up some time you were hoping maybe would be spent in slightly better ways at times, and that is pretty much the entire first act. Not only is this a far more well put together title in pretty much every single way, it corrects so much of what the first title slipped up on and redirects it towards a well-polished, consistently innovating game that started out rather slow, infinitely better than Starfield though, I will add, and immediately gives the player choices right off the bat, choices that, within the first hour of the introduction, actually impact areas way later on in the game, which was incredible to see. And naturally, I'm doing my Psychopath run right now, and the choices they're letting me make are insane. Outer Worlds was the first game I ever did a Psycho Run video on, and it started that whole series that I continue to love making videos for. And yes, I'll get to Baldur's Gate 3 eventually, but this game, just to give a bit of a taste of the chaos, pretty much allows you to slaughter in glorious fashion entire towns, cities, civilizations as part of the story if you so choose. We're not talking about, oh yeah, then I got bored and went to town and killed everyone. No, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but you can commit genocide to your criminal events if you pursue that path hard enough. And that, everyone, is what I think most people are wanting in their RPGs. You wanna be the good guy? Outer Worlds 2 is crammed with choices not only to build your character's reputation up in that direction, but forces you to make complicated decisions in the moment to put you into that tough situation of, can I save everyone? You can just be a random passerby who's not interested in saving anyone, but just wanting to complete the task at hand. The character creation, which I will say is one of the biggest letdowns for me for sure, and I'll get to that in a minute. It allows you to pick a path for your character to follow, and you feel it in this game constantly. It's nothing like Cyberpunk, where your life paths are this illusion of character background, basically giving you pointless dialogue with very little push. The Outer Worlds 2 character paths can quite literally change the entire course of a mission you're on. For example, my criminal background put me into multiple situations where I was able to press people into submission with threats. Even your base stats, for example, I chose Brawny. That enables me to rip open some doors you can't unless you choose that path. But then, because I'm not Bill Nye the Science Guy, I can't interact with any of the beneficial technology. You can literally see where the complaints of the original game disappear in this one because you feel the effects of your chosen path every couple of minutes. But it takes a while to get there. Like I mentioned, yes, you do have a lot of choices right off the bat, but if I'm honest with you, This game starts a lot slower and quite a bit more story-driven for the first couple of hours. The first game dropped you in, and you're shooting guys, immediately presented with dialogue, conflict, all that good stuff. This one eases you a bit more into things, which makes a lot more sense when you get further into the game, because you realize how important learning the combat and dialogue can be. It's a far more entertaining intro, but I can see returning to it in a new game will be a bit tedious and stretched out. But what's not tedious is that gameplay, because my word, they did not skimp on taking this further than I thought they would. Not to mention how brutally difficult it is even on normal. The gunplay is phenomenal, especially for an RPG. Obsidian knew that was one of the biggest complaints with the first one and ramped it up to really feel like every moment of a combat encounter is not only intense, but methodical and well-rounded. The sheer amount of weaponry they give you to then upgrade, add attachments to, modify, it's impressive how much they've expanded on the original arsenal and how good the shooting feels. This time around, the fights are infinitely more savage, with enemies that actually play aggressively and seem like they want you dead, versus the first game where it felt like you just destroyed enemies no matter what difficulty you were on. There is a huge skill gap in this one, forcing you to actually take cover, use companions wisely, not constantly overdose on your inhaler because of the toxicity buildup, and food finally matters in this game, in a different way, mind you. In the first game, you could just inhale your entire inventory of food, each giving you benefits and an effect, which in turn would quite literally allow you to one-shot an enemy boss. Here, food is purely meant for health buffs outside of combat, forcing you to use your inhaler modestly within combat. I will say this, however, the melee combat went brawny in the hopes that it would be similar to Avowed's melee combat, but this is just very basic. It's decent at best, but the gunplay is where the combat shines. And the grenades, that's basically all I craft. The general feeling of the gameplay is also fantastic. They've added a lot of good movement upgrades, smooth mantling, crouch sliding, double jumps. It's honestly far more fast-paced overall, which suits this game very well, especially considering the fact that there are no ground vehicles. But your character's movement speed is also very set on your armor choices and the way you built them at the beginning of the game, which leads me to the customization, which I will say, it's alright. Now, it's definitely not terrible, that belongs to Destiny or Vampire's Bloodlines 2, and I'm sure you could think of many more, but still, they do give you a wide range of faces to choose from, but for an RPG, especially one where now you can see your character in third person whenever you want, they really confine things to a few sliders, including your facial structure. Which, if I want to make a Saints Row abomination, I would like to have those sliders. You can't make yourself morbidly obese or a pencil. Short or tall doesn't exist. Everyone is the same height here. But yeah, I'm nitpicking a bit for sure. I've gotten used to customizers in Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring, and I've noticed that in recent years we're always told that expressing ourselves and our characters is important, yet for some reason the customization options just keep getting more and more limited. If I want to be green, I want to be green! Also, there's no option to be eyebrowless, which definitely makes 10-piece Nug look way too well put together. But like I said, it's not horrible, and I'm definitely nitpicking here, but I do enjoy having all of the sliders to go nuts with if I want. I like seeing that level of customization in RPGs, even if my character looks like a subhuman species. So, the character customization is a bit generic, but the gameplay is great. Dialogue and choices are fantastic. The story is really well put together. The character background impact on story is quite expansive, and the graphics are beautiful. Unfortunately, at the cost of performance. So just a warning there, my rig was definitely stuttering at moments and had some drastic FPS dips in the more, detailed and animated areas. It did well in the open world setting for the most part, but in those separate cell interiors, I would occasionally feel those frames drop. Which leads me to one of my favorite topics, and that is the world, which they once again knocked out of the park. This isn't nearly as confined and limited as the first game was. It has way bigger maps to travel that are heavily detailed, making each planet unique and different from the rest. Exploration really seems to be a huge focus point in this one, allowing players to either entirely ignore areas if they just want to rush the story, or check out a small nook or cranny that ends up becoming a vital piece to the narrative. The first map immediately catches you with that feeling of vast exploration, something that the first game failed to do because the more limited nature and walled off areas. This game encourages exploring off the beaten path, except the water. No swimming allowed. Swimming has not been invented in space yet, so maybe by The Outer Worlds 3. But each planet has its own feel, enemy variety, stories to tell, everything a good open-ended RPG should include, yet on a far greater scale than the first game tried to achieve. All in all, The Outer Worlds 2 is absolutely worth your time, especially to scratch that itch of, man, I just really want to destroy the entire universe. Or, how can I manipulate this entire town into giving me all their stuff? This is far, far closer to that New Vegas RPG we were expecting the first game to be, and although obviously very different setting and style, it'll be something New Vegas fans will definitely enjoy. The leap between the first and the second game is monumental, and the dialogue is far more impactful this time around. There's still all the corny capitalism jokes and whatnot, don't really think you can avoid that with the world they created, but I also don't think it's nearly as cringy as people were expecting it to be, simply because it ties in with the story very well. So instead of it being capitalism bad just for the butt end of a joke, it dives far deeper this time into the monopolizing corruption basically flaunted without fear of opposition, and humanity's exhaustion and hopelessness of feeling like slaves to a system that abuses them, but they can't find a way out. So everyone just puts a smile on their face and keeps selling the product. I'm not gonna spoil the story obviously, but I will say that the amount of influence you get to have on it is very impressive. So, in a world of games that are very hit or miss, and this one seems like people are very skeptical of it entirely because Xbox is committing destroy fanbase, but you can tell Obsidian locked in with this one, and surprisingly, even though Avowed should have been their flagship title this year, The Outer Worlds 2 is without a doubt superior, and I'm hoping that they continue to expand on this franchise because it is really shaping up well. Now those are just my quick, hopefully spoiler-free thoughts, but I'd like to know what you all think, if you'll be checking out the game come launch, or if this one doesn't really appeal to you for some reason. But until next time,